Well, hello. My name is Angel Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Welcome back, everybody. I am on my way back from COVID. Yep, dodged it for 2.5 years, worked at my friend's comedy club, and caught it. I say this, if you can avoid getting it, I highly recommend it. It's been a really weird experience. Aside from being really tired, not really in the mindset to do much of anything, as you may have noticed from my episode release schedule, I was disinterested in many things, like I couldn't eat. Nothing was appealing. My taste is off. It's still off. I didn't lose it entirely. I can still smell things. I can still taste things. But my taste is off. Like my coffee in the morning doesn't taste right. I spent the better part of a week just eating peanut butter M&Ms. I know that sounds funny, but that's all I consumed. It's all that I was interested in eating. And it's difficult now because now I'm craving sugar. So I got a whole bunch of things on my plate. But thank you to all of you who have been patiently waiting for the return of the new season. And I'm in it. I am here. So many of you have been generous. I'm going to list the names of some folks who've donated to the show. You've been giving the dog a bone, as I like to say. Sandy, Valerie, Sarah from Seattle, Patricia, Rhiannon, Deb, Audrey, and exciting news, I launched a Patreon. I have an official patron, the wonderful, the truly dedicated and loyal Sandy is my very first Patreon patron. Thank you, Sandy. You are a total gem in the total gem tier. Look forward to wonderful Crime of the Truest Kind things coming your way. There are 4 tiers. Wicked Cool, Solid Gold, Total Gem, Superstar, all at crimeofthetruestkind.com. I'm very excited about the prospect of having a Patreon and having my first official patron. I know I sat it out. I sat out Patreon for a really long time, and I decided that I would prefer not to have ads on the show. So if it can be a patron-supported show, that would be my preference. Support the show, yes, please. Rate and review the show. Anybody who leaves a positive written review, I will put you in the lottery for a merch bundle. 5 stars are my favorite. Follow the show Crime of the Truest Kind. Instagram, Facebook, at Truest Kind on Twitter, Crime of the Truest Kind on TikTok. On YouTube, I post all of the shows in a video form on YouTube. I'm planning on doing a live stream for the anniversary. I have not settled on a date yet. I've had a lot going on. I really always do have a lot going on, but truly this time it was because I got COVID. All your support matters. All your kind words matter. I posted a wonderful Apple Podcast review that someone left me. They said, outstanding. Thank you for your pod. Thank you right back. The show is 2 years old, but I'm starting all over again because of that massive hiatus I was forced into. But it's great to be back, and I'm starting to feel better. So things are looking up. I am committed to creating new episodes on a schedule that's manageable. You have my word. A few of you asked about the books I cited in the last episodes. I do list them as sources on the website. Teach Me to Kill: The Shocking True Story of the Pamela Smart Murder Case by Stephen Sawicki. It's Sawicki. And Skylights and Screen Doors by Dean Smart. That's Gregg's younger brother. And I have read a lot of articles, watched a lot of documentaries. There's a lot out there. So thank you, friends of the show. This is part 3 of 3, episode 34. The Murder of Gregg Smart, Derry, New Hampshire. Trial of the century. And when I tell you it was batshit bananas, oh my God, was it ever. All right, this is part 3 of 3. So if you haven't yet, go back and listen to parts 1 and 2, which are episodes 32 and 33, you dig? I will provide a brief refresher. Gregg Smart was shot to death in the front hallway of his rented condo on May 1st, 1990. He was 24 years old and 1 week away from his first wedding anniversary. Gregg was starting out successfully in a career as an insurance broker, following in his father Bill's footsteps, a career that had been very good to the Smart family. It had taken a few weeks for the inevitable towny chatter to make it to the police. By mid-May, people were calling the cops to drop leads in the case. Now, in episodes 32 and 33, I walk you through the case leading up to the arrest of the 3 boys who were involved in Gregg's murder. 3 teenage boys from Seabrook, New Hampshire, all of whom attended Winnicott High School in Hampton, the school where Pamela Smart, Gregg Smart's 22-year-old new wife, worked in the media services department of the school. She was not a teacher. People want to argue this fact with me. She was a teacher. Why, because you Googled it? Go fuck yourself. Billy Flynn, J.R. Latimer. I say that only half kidding. Billy Flynn, J.R. Latimer, and Pete Randall, who earlier had just passed his driver's test, were taken into custody for the murder of Gregg Smart. Take that in for a minute. Remember what you were like when you got your driver's license? That feeling of freedom and kind of hopefulness? Pete Randall got his license and then went to jail for a very long time. He would not use that driver's license for many, many years to come. Their charges were juvenile delinquency, which, if changed, and they were charged as adults, as would be the case, would become first-degree murder for Billy Flynn and Pete Randall, and driver and weapon provider J.R. Latimer would be accomplice to first-degree murder. It was just before 10 p.m., and Bill Spencer, the intrepid TV reporter who had sewn himself into the story like the seam in a quilt, he would break the story on WMUR's 11 o'clock news broadcast. He had been tipped off by a state cop who had told him they had a big break in the case, and they knew who killed Gregg Smart. They were, Bill Spencer would learn, 3 teenagers from Seabrook. Bill Spencer made some calls, backed up some reporting, and was ready to roll with the story at the 11 p.m. broadcast. And guess who was watching that broadcast? Well, a lot of people were. And Pamela Smart was. She was watching, but she wasn't alone that night. Her friend Terry Schnell was staying over. Pam needed company. She was really alone now. Bill Spencer would, however, not name the boys, but just 3 boys. All they got was that 3 unnamed juveniles had been arrested. It was 6 weeks since Gregg was ambushed and shot in the head in the hallway of his home. Unidentified Seabrook teenagers. She knew who they were, but she went through the motions, followed her script, and began calling people who might be able to tell her specifically who those 3 boys were. That had to have been one sleepless night. If she had not had any previously, let's hope this one kept her awake. On Tuesday morning, Pam was back on her bullshit and on the phone with Elaine Flynn, Billy's mom, who told Pam it was Billy, Pete, and JR who had been arrested. Mrs. Flynn also told Pam she better get a lawyer. The boys were minors, and they could not be identified as a result. But that didn't stop Bill Spencer. He drove to Winnicott to dig. There must be a connection, and he wanted to find it. He did with little effort in the student newspaper. There in a rack in the entrance of the high school, in the school newspaper, the Winnicott Chronicle, the student voice of Winnicott High School since 1985, was a photo of Pamela Smart, Billy Flynn, and Pete Randall on the front page. And there it is. 2 of the 3 boys who were arrested and about to be arraigned on murder charges in the death of Gregg Smart just a month and a half earlier were tied to his wife, Pamela Smart. Oh, just wait, though. This stuff is chum for a very hungry media. It took the arrest of unnamed minors for Pam to fall apart. That's sure what it looked like when reporter Bill Spencer showed up to her front door for comment. The woman who had been running a virtual PR campaign for her widowhood now was devastated. The same woman who'd done a television interview just days after her husband was murdered. This was among the many red flags in this investigation. They had solved her husband's murder, yet she was inconsolable. Could Pam Smart have been so naive that she didn't recognize that she was among the suspects herself? This was getting wildly exciting for New Hampshire. Newspapers were flying off the stands. Derry News, Manchester's Union Leader, Nashua Telegraph, Portsmouth Herald, Foster's Daily Democrat. Even the Lawrence Eagle Tribune was in on the action. And, of course, the Boston papers, the Herald and the Globe, all clamoring for headlines. Most everyone, including WMUR, agreed not to use the boys' names or pictures, as state law decrees, but the union leader ran photos of Billy, Pete, and JR and identified them without ever facing legal challenge. And the news was wildly exciting for WMUR Channel 9 TV in Manchester, New Hampshire. This case was a boon for that small market TV news station. And just imagine how young reporter Bill Spencer was feeling, frothing at the mouth, I would guess, now that 3 teenage boys from Seabrook, who all attended the very same high school that Pamela Smart worked for, now that they were arrested? Oh. I am imagining Billy Flynn, Pete Randall, and J.R. Latimer being arrested in the uniform of the time. Mullets, dungaree jackets, 80s rock band t-shirts, floppy sneakers. Like Eddie Munson on Stranger Things. Not a real person, though I gotta admit, I think the fictitious character of Eddie is pretty damn cool. And a lot like at least one dude I knew growing up in New Hampshire. I don't think these boys had an inkling of what was about to happen. Their entire future was derailed, run off the tracks, crashed, now fully engulfed. They were so fucked. Any excitement Pete Randall may have felt about passing his driver's test was very short-lived. The newly minted license to drive would be shelved for at least 25 years, and at the time of his arrest, Billy Flynn had 21 cents and change in his pocket. There is one player that takes a front row seat in the next act. That's Cecilia Pierce, Pamela Smart's teenage intern turned confidant. Cecilia was a pretty regular 15-year-old girl in the fall of 1989, when she became the intern for the new media coordinator at the high school. Cecilia Pierce was from Seabrook, the town of about 6,500 people in 1990. While it was an ocean town and borders Massachusetts, not much goes on, except for some fireworks. I've mentioned this. All the massholes run over the border to get their explosives. Seabrook is a fireworks destination. Cecilia had blonde hair with poofed up bangs. She wore high-waisted, front-pleated, acid-wash jeans. Now, I'm not making fun of Cecilia. We all wore those. I was a teenager in 1990. It was pre-grunge, and we were still getting lots of mileage out of our 80s wardrobes. Cecilia would often be put in charge of her younger siblings at home. So to get attention and some responsibility in the media center, she had to have been feeling pretty good. And Pamela Smart, whatever her condition, and I must say that I don't know that she was officially diagnosed with any kind of personality disorder, she was leaning on Cecilia, pulling Cecilia into her world, so much so that Cecilia learned intimate details of Pam's life at 15. In the book, Teach Me to Kill, the author Stephen Sawicki talks about the disparity in their ages. And despite all that, they were best friends. She definitely developed loyalty. I can't help but wonder, where were Pam's friends during this time? Her age-appropriate friends. This kind of relationship was new to Cecilia. She looked up to Pam, someone who seemed intelligent, talked a good game, seemed self-assured, educated, and had goals for herself. Cecilia hadn't gotten to do any of that yet. She was years away from college or adult life. And Pam made Cecilia feel important, included, and part of something. Any younger person would be all in for that. Plus, Pam was generous. She'd pay for things when they went out. When Cecilia started driving, she let her drive her Honda CRX with that Halen vanity plate. But her friendship with Pamela Smart was unbalanced. She was available 24/7, and all aspects of Cecilia's life were beginning to fall apart. It affected her friendships, her grades, her life at home. About their odd relationship, Cecilia's mother, Cecilia Eaton, said in Stephen Sawicki's book that she liked it less and less, and it was making her angry. She even said to Cecilia one day, "You'd think Pam was your mother. Well, I'm your mother, not Pam." That's pretty New Hampshire in its delivery, but I might have turned her mother into a truck stop waitress. When Cecilia's grades began to tank, her mom went to the school officials about the inordinate amount of time that Cecilia was at the school board's media center. The assistant principal agreed and had noticed it too, but it never went any further than that conversation. Once their orange juice project was in full swing, Pam, Bill, and Cecilia were sort of a happy trio, hanging together, going to malls, arcades, restaurants, and clubs. Sidebar thought here. Based on this information, it would seem to me that Pam was living her teen years then, at 22. She'd gone from being a dutiful student in high school straight to college, where she worked full-time and balanced classes and graduated early. Were thoughts of being free of these new responsibilities of her married life catching up to her? I don't know. As the media coordinator, Pam was managing that student video project. Among the main cast was, if you said Bill Flynn and Cecilia Pierce, give yourself 50 points. I kind of let the cat out of the bag on that one already. They go to her condo in Derry and work on the project and go to Billy's house on the beach in Seabrook. They were spending more and more time together through the fall into that winter. And interestingly enough, Pamela Smart never mentioned Bill Flynn when police asked her who among her friends had been in her house. Another obvious question here is, where was Gregg during all of this? That's not entirely clear, but they were having some problems, and it's believed that he was spending more time with his friends, thus allowing Pam to monopolize the time of these two kids from Seabrook. Selfish people need constant attention. They are often clueless of the impact it has on those around them, and the first ones to point fingers at other people's behaviors. Again, I don't have any confirmation as to whether Pam Smart was diagnosed with any personality disorder. She did love to be the center of attention and wanted to have control over everything. She was high functioning. Lots of people have mental health issues and personality disorders and do not orchestrate a murder. On that last night of Gregg's life, Gregg Smart, the guy who was murdered, I want to keep dropping his name as a reminder of who the real victim here is in this story. The murdered man, Gregg Smart. On his last night alive, Pam Smart made the drive from Hampton to Derry, passing the car full of killers on the way home. It was long after dark, and I've tried to sort out the timeline here. In Dean Smart's book, he wrote that Gregg was at their parents' house a few blocks away playing with his baby niece, and that's why he was later than usual in getting home. Remember, Flynn and Randall were waiting for a while. A lot of the narrative in this case, particularly the spate of news magazine shows like Hard Copy, a current affair type shows, ran with the story that Pamela Smart had this power over all of the boys to make them do her bidding. I never believed that she asked the other boys to do anything. I believe that the friendship of Billy, JR, and Pete, and Raymond Fowler to a lesser degree, was how this whole poorly written drama unfolded. Billy wanted Pam, and in his newly sexed up 15-year-old's hormonal brain, he needed to hold on to her. Okay, 16. He turned 16 in March of that year. His friends stepped up out of loyalty. Yes, and I believe they thought they would make some money. But also JR, and probably Raymond Fowler at the same time, didn't think they could pull it off and thought for sure they'd screw it up. And that poses another question I didn't have until right now. Had they not gone through with it that night, would JR and Raymond Fowler have taken over? Unlikely. I find all of this to be foolishness and murder. It is a fool's game. Let's stop and look at the timeline of events. Gregg Smart is killed on May 1st, 1990. On May 14th, an anonymous call is placed to the Derry Police Department that links Cecilia Pierce, the 15-year-old Winnicott student, and Pamela Smart's intern to the murder case. On May 17th, Detective Daniel Pelletier contacts Cecilia by phone. On May 21st, Detective Barry Cherowitz interviewed Cecilia at her home in Seabrook. She denied knowing anything about a plot to murder Gregg, but does tell the detective that she stayed at the Smarts' condo the week before Gregg was killed. Saturday, June 9th, 1990. Ralph Welch, 18, who was living in the Latimer family home at the time, confronts Pete Randall and J.R. Latimer after hearing from Danny Blake that they were involved in the murder. Welch told them he heard it from a friend who heard it from Raymond Fowler. The boys deny it all at first, but soon Pete and J.R. admit their involvement in the murder and that they used Latimer's father's gun. June 10th. Ralph, now very bothered by what he has learned, goes to Mr. Latimer. I described this entire day's events in part 2. Ralph Welch tells J.R.'s father, Vance Latimer Sr., who in turn brings the .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver to Seabrook police. He tells them he believes that it's been used in a murder. Ralph Welch also speaks to the Seabrook police and tells them what he knows about the murder of Gregg Smart. Monday, June 11th. Billy Flynn, Pete Randall, and J.R. Latimer are arrested for the murder of Gregg Smart. June 12th. News is now broken about the arrests, and the Derry police receive an anonymous call telling them that a school teacher was sleeping with one of the boys and that she staged the thing. June 14th. Rumors are rampant that a girl involved in the Gregg Smart case is going to be arrested. A very nervous Cecilia Pierce meets with the Derry Police Department and tells them about Pamela Smart's involvement in the murder. It is completely plausible that the cops planted the plan of another arrest to get her to talk. Whatever the case, she talked. They had enough on Cecilia to charge her too. June 19th. Cecilia, authorized by her mother, agrees to be an informant, essentially. She participates in a one-party consent telephone tap from her home in Seabrook to Pam Smart. Police record the call. This is the first of several recordings the police will perform with Cecilia's help. First recording is a telephone tap. The next are wires, none of which are very audible. Good God, the shitty technology in 1990. Detective Pelletier enlists the help of an audio specialist to work on improving the quality of the recordings. I also talk a bit about this in the last episode. July 12th and 13th. Cecilia Pierce visits Pamela Smart in person at her office across from Winnicott, and one time they're in a car in a parking lot. Cecilia is wearing a wire. Police are staked out in a van nearby, just like you see in the movies. The recording device is pretty cumbersome, but Cecilia engages Pam Smart and secretly records the most damning evidence against her. Here's where the famous "getting sent to the fucking slammer for the rest of our lives" line comes from. The audio would not translate in this podcast at all, because it's terrible, but it goes like this. If you tell the fucking truth, you send me to the slammer for the rest of my fucking life. You send Billy, you send Pete, you send JR. If you tell the truth, you're going to be an accessory to murder. Doesn't sound like Pam Smart at all, but you get the gist. A total of 7 recordings were made between Cecilia and Pam, which started in mid-July to the final phone call on August 1st, the same day Pam was arrested. During one of their conversations, Pam brings up the prospect of Cecilia being wired. She asks her to give her some sort of signal that she might use to indicate that she was wired. And Cecilia, thinking fast, responds, "I'll just wink." And she was, in fact, wired. To Cecilia's credit, though, she held up and didn't seem to panic. There was a lot at stake for her. She could have gotten arrested based on what she knew and didn't tell. Plus, she was selling her story, and she was sitting for all kinds of interviews. She did have a deal on the table to be paid $100,000 for the rights to her story if a movie was made. And I don't know if that movie ever got made, so I don't know if she ever saw that money. On Wednesday, August 1st, there was one final phone conversation between Pam Smart and Cecilia Pierce. One last chance to see what she might say. That call, made from Cecilia's house in Seabrook to Pam Smart's work phone at the Winnicott High School Media Center in Hampton. At the very same time, Detective Pelletier is preparing an affidavit and warrant at the District Court in Derry to arrest Pam Smart and charge her as an accomplice to first-degree murder of Gregg Smart. After mining the audio on those secret tapes, Derry police are satisfied with their haul. Detective Daniel Pelletier, who was on the case 1 hour after learning of Gregg's murder, was the cop to make the caller. That's a little cop talk I have picked up along the way during my true crime career. A group of officers and detectives from Derry and Seabrook met in Hampton. Detective Pelletier headed right for Pam's office in the lower level of the building in the media center, ignoring anyone, including the receptionist out front. Other officers took watch just in case she tried to get away. Pam greeted Detective Pelletier. She could not have been surprised to see him. Her attorneys must have tipped her off to her arrest. Detective Pelletier delivered what might be the best line of his career. He says, "We have some good news, and we have some bad news. The good news is we finally solved the murder of your husband. The bad news is you're under arrest." Pam Smart was read her rights and didn't say anything more to detectives. On her last day of freedom, she's wearing an olive green dress, the very same color she says is what she'd end up wearing in prison. The case played out under the watchful eye of WMUR News, which had shown up to the scene, of course they did. And Pam was transported to the Derry Police Department. She got one phone call and was put in a cell. I'm guessing that one phone call went to her lawyers because she was in some pretty deep shit. The afternoon of August 1st, 1990 were her last moments of freedom. 32 years, 2 months, and about 22 days from this recording. That's a long time to think about the mistakes that you have made. Pamela Smart joined Billy Flynn, Pete Randall, and J.R. Latimer in that slammer she had so much to say about. All four were facing very serious charges, and the boys would be charged as adults. Raymond Fowler would remain free and was later arrested after Pam's pretrial motions had started. It was a proud moment for Detective Pelletier, for the Derry Police, and the Seabrook Department. After all, it was there where Ralph Welch and Vance Latimer Sr. went to break the case wide open. Detective Pelletier had found Pam Smart's willingness to talk to the media days after the murder of her husband to be abnormal. Despite the police's warnings not to talk to the media, she seemed to not be able to help herself. Detective Pelletier had noted Pam's reaction to Gregg's death as, quote, handling this more professionally than emotionally. Yeah, it was something like that. I liken her behavior to the widow's PR campaign. Yes, people behave differently to loss. To me, and to many others, I am sure. She loved the attention. It checked some boxes for her. No one felt this more than the Smart family. And Dean Smart mentions it a number of times in his book, Skylights and Screen Doors. Dean was never a fan of Pamela Smart. On the first day of August, exactly 4 months after Gregg Smart was murdered, finally, the Smart family found some relief. Bill and Judy Smart, Gregg's mom and dad, wanted desperately for her to be arrested. Mr. Smart had been helping police for a while, but as the information Cecilia was sharing came to light, their family got more and more angry. The boys kept quiet. That is until prosecutor Paul Maggiato announced that he'd be charging them as adults, meaning they too would be facing life in prison without parole. They would eventually cooperate and tell their whole story. How Billy was sleeping with Pam, and how she told him it was him or me, kill Gregg or you can't have me. Pamela had to admit to the sex, often referred to as an affair. She had admitted to what Billy and Cecilia said. Pamela would only say their sexual relationship started when he was 16. The age of consent in New Hampshire is 16. Pamela insisted she had no part in the plot to kill Gregg Smart. She continues to claim her innocence to this day. The Smart family has said on many occasions that if she would admit to her part in the plan, then maybe, just maybe, they would consider some options for Pam. Both parents are gone now. Mom Judy Smart passed in 1998, and Dad Bill Smart passed in 2010. It would be left to Gregg's two brothers now. And after learning a bit about how the family feels, I can only imagine it would be a cold day in hell before they would entertain Pamela Smart getting out of prison. I believe it would have to start with them. News of Pamela Smart's arrest traveled fast. in this case made the press go full-on batshit bananas. It has all the ingredients for sensation. Young female high school media coordinator. Not a teacher, please. She was never a teacher. She wanted to teach a class, but she never did. And 3 high school boys. Oh, imaginations went wild. It didn't take much. When Pam was arrested, the boys weren't talking. They were in a juvenile facility. We used to call it YDC, Youth Detention Center. They believed for a little while, at least, that they'd be juveniles, and they'd do some time inside and be out by the time they turned 18. And Cecilia was making up for them, telling everything she knew about Pam and Billy and the plan. Every news story had a new headline about the young widow and the high school boy. And the public knew her. After all, Pam Smart had injected herself into the media with her widow PR campaign. Pamela is arrested in August. Her attorneys must prepare a defense. They will head to trial in March. That's 7 months' time. Meanwhile, the state is in the process of having the 3 boys charged as adults. A first-degree murder charge is throwing your life away. You are as good as gone. Pamela Smart often says that her case was sensationalized and she didn't get a fair trial. I agree with at least the first part. It was an absolute circus. I was pretty young and I hadn't seen anything of its kind before. But let's make one thing very clear. Pamela Smart thrust herself into the public eye. Bad move. It's a ridiculous thing to do for someone who would be arrested and charged with planning Gregg's murder. Talk about ego. It seems narcissistic to me. But again, I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose people. It was just the beginning of her relationship with the media. All that attention was going to be bad for her. Her defense attorneys had tried to get her released. Her mother, Mrs. Wojcik, who I also have a great deal of compassion for, still stands by her daughter today. She tried to get Pam released on bail, saying she was suffering in jail. That didn't go over well, and Pam did not get out on bail. The salacious nature of the story was exciting. Many in the media could not contain themselves. I make this joke that when someone is full of themselves, that they like the smell of their own farts. Sure, it's juvenile, but it gets a laugh. And I'm pretty sure I got it from South Park. WMUR Channel 9 News was drunk on its own stink. The station produced a movie called Anatomy of a Murder, hosted by Bill Spencer himself, that aired just 2 days before jury selection. Pre-trial publicity was bananas. When Pam's attorneys wanted a change of venue, the judge in the case, Superior Court Justice Douglas Gray, denied any attempt to have the trial moved to Grafton County. That is in the beautiful White Mountains region of the state, up where Franconia notches and many of the other very scenic places in the state. We go snowmobiling up there, and it's amazing. New Hampshire has spectacular sights. You should visit. Maybe none of us realize that a portion of this podcast is New England tourism. It's lovely here. Because of the feeding frenzy, there were concerns that the jury should have been sequestered. Chief Prosecutor Paul Maggiato noted the cost to the state, and the case stayed in Rockingham County. The trial was held in Exeter, where the Rockingham County Superior Court was located at the time, about 30 minutes from Derry and under 20 minutes from Seabrook. I recommend the HBO documentary Captivated, The Trials of Pamela Smart, released in 2014. It doesn't defend Pamela Smart in a way to suggest her innocence, but it focuses on the media's feeding frenzy and the attention to the case and to Pamela herself. It blurred out any idea of reasonable doubt, considering Pamela Smart was not present for the actual murder of Gregg Smart. While I will spare you from lengthy clips, I will play the trailer.
There's someone passed out. I don't know. A girl is hysterical in here. She just ran over. Her husband is passed out.
Do you know why he's passed out there, ma'am?
He's on the way. Do you know why he's passed out? No, we don't know.
May 1st, 1990, 24-year-old Gregory Smart has been shot in the head. His wife, Pamela Smart, is accused of plotting her husband's death.
You got anything to say this morning? Are you involved in this murder?
She plotted the murder of her husband along with 3 teenage boys.
All along, she has said she would welcome the start of her trial so she could prove her innocence. Well, Pamela Smart is about to get her wish.
This is going to be the first trial ever covered live on television.
No one had ever seen a television show where you watched real life play out in real time.
There's no soap opera to this. It's real stuff.
Nothing happens, and it's totally fascinating.
Litigation as entertainment was just exploding, and it exploded through this trial.
From Boston, from New Hampshire, from all over New England. And then it's national news. In fact, around the world is trying to cover this story. It is gigantic.
That all of New Hampshire, if not the nation, is inflamed at the appearance of Pamela Smart.
So, light back on.
That's from the HBO documentary Captivated, The Trials of Pamela Smart. And it's not about changing your mind about her guilt or her innocence. It's about the frenzy of the media and how convincing that they can be without really telling you the truth of the story. The jurors went home each night after their day in court. They were sequestered on the second day of deliberations after a 2-week trial. And there were the state's witnesses, Billy Flynn, Gerald Adamy, Pete Randall, all housed together in jail during the trial. I think she landed where she should be. And it's not up to me to determine really anything. But the sensationalism of this case left no room. She was tried in the court of public opinion. I read a quote somewhere that it was the trial that launched 1,000 feeds. No case had been broadcast this way. Court TV was born. All regular daytime programming was preempted by the trial. You weren't getting General Hospital. There was no One Life to Live. I think the soaps may have aired overnight, or you'd have to watch Channel 5 in Boston if you could get it. Gavel-to-gavel coverage began March 4th, 1991. Judge Douglas Gray presided in the Rockingham County Superior Courthouse in Exeter, New Hampshire. Millions watched it live, with rapt fascination as they detailed the deadly plot and how it played out in a New Hampshire high school involving sex and money and murder. The media makes things up, and they exaggerate things for a saucier story. Newspapers loved the image of an attractive young white widow as a suspect of her own husband's murder. Lines like Ice Princess and Black Widow were used in headlines. Pam was regularly called a teacher. I'll say it again. She was never a teacher. The media is suggestive and writes new narratives. Look at what happens in politics. Oh, and I hate talking politics, so that's all we're going to say about that right now. During the trial, Billy Flynn was constantly referred to as a 15-year-old boy, even though he was almost 17 when the trial started. Jurors went home every night, and no one knew if they were watching any of the news coverage of the trial. You couldn't get away from it. Defense lawyer Mark Sisti was quoted saying, "It had all the emotional elements to feed a media frenzy. It had youth, it had sex, it had violence." Sisti and his partner, Paul Twomey, had tried 50 murder cases before taking on the Gregg Smart murder case. And they have handled countless jury trials since then. But that was the strangest case they'd ever been through, they said. The media made it so strange. What was on display was how a young, educated woman played with the loyalty of 3 longtime friends. The unprecedented live coverage gave us front row seats. WMUR Channel 9 carried the proceedings, interrupting regular daily programming with a live feed from the courtroom, and then broadcasting the day's highlights at night. Oh yeah, it was a whole show. It even had an intro.
This is a News 9 special report.
Good evening, I'm Tom Griffith. Once again tonight, we bring you a recap of testimony and developments in the Pamela Smart accomplice to murder trial. Tonight, we will be with you for a half hour. Derry Police Detective Daniel Pelletier took the stand this morning and told of his early conversations with some of the teens involved with Pamela Smart and how he eventually came to record conversations between Pamela Smart and Cecilia Pierce, which the state maintains implicates Pamela Smart as an accomplice to the crime. Later, we will hear some of those recorded conversations. But first, the testimony from Derry Detective Daniel Pelletier.
Yeah. Tom Griffin, remember him? He worked at Channel 9 until this year. He just retired. Yeah, it's a blast from the past. A couple of other names that I saw when I was doing research. Remember Karen Appel, who became Karen Brown? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nanette Hansen. Yeah. It's going back. This is only relevant to people who lived in, New Hampshire back then, I guess. Former Rockingham County Sheriff Wayne Vedder, Vetter, not like Eddie, Vedder, estimated there were over 150 reporters from all over the world encamped at the courthouse. This being new territory, the judge laid out guidelines for the reporters who were present for the trial. Every part of the day had to be planned from the moment Pam was picked up at the women's prison in Goffstown, which was about 45 minutes from the courthouse each way, to when she was delivered back following the day's events. 4 deputies would transport Pam, including 1 female officer, in 2 cars in case one of the vehicles broke down on the way to or from the courthouse. Pam got a lot of supervision. How about those jurors? To keep members of the press in order inside the courthouse, Sheriff Vedder put duct tape down on the floor to mark where the reporters could stand. Only 2 media people, both from Boston TV stations, crossed the line, and they were escorted out, those city fuckers. Reporters swarmed, going after anyone involved in the case. Lawyers, family members, they even tried to follow Pam into the bathroom to take pictures. Not many paid attention to the trial going on right next door, the White Sock murder trial. Paroled rapist Daniel von Bogart, 28 years old, was on trial for the September 1989 strangulation, murder, and rape of 29-year-old Kimberly Goss with a white tube sock. It was his M.O., something the prosecution called the killer's signature, as a woman and a man who had been raped by von Bogart said he used a white sock while assaulting them. Even von Bogart's mother testified against him, claiming he admitted to the murder. He was convicted of first-degree murder. Kimberly Goss was found behind her home in Londonderry. Her killer is serving a life in prison sentence with no chance of parole and is believed to be responsible for other murders. I'll be reading up on that case. I found myself rabbit-holing it a little bit the other night, and I had to stop. Reporters filled one side of the courtroom with their cameras, tape recorders, and notebooks in hand. Somehow, though, the lawyers remained undistracted by the media. The judge maintained control in that courtroom. Sheriff Vedder found it impressive, given how much could have gone wrong. On March 4th, Pam Smart's defense attorney, Mark Sisti, urged the jury to keep an open mind and maintain a fair approach to the trial of his client during the opening remarks. It was an important message, since the news was saturated with stories of hot-for-teacher high school boy sex. The defense worried about the fairness to their client. To believe in the process, not to jump to conclusions or be swayed by the media hype. Those magazine shows were all the rage, the current affairs, the hard copies, and there were countless daytime talk shows like Geraldo and Sally Jesse Raphael and Donahue, Oprah. High school, high-stakes sexcapades were good for ratings and fed the water cooler talk. Pamela Smart knows she was hated, and she knows why. She was a caricature. I don't defend Pam Smart, but I remember how damning the publicity in the trial was for her. Pamela is on tape lying. The recordings aren't clear, partially inaudible. And to this day, no one knows who transcribed those conversations. Transcripts of the tapes that were so terribly damning for their client. Pamela Smart's team believes those transcripts are misleading and don't tell the whole story. The defense team requested a change of venue, but it was denied. The defense wanted to sequester the jury to keep them from seeing the circus. There are stories of juror misconduct, one juror reportedly recording themselves every night after the day's proceedings and was trying to sell those recordings. The judge, Judge Gray, said there was no cause for a new trial. While the trial was going on, a movie was being made about the story, starring Helen Hunt, Howard Hessman, Dr. Johnny Fever. He played prosecutor Paul Maggiato, Sean Bridgers as Ralph Welch, who recently starred as Pam Hupp's husband, Mark, in The Thing About Pam, a different felon. Many people testified over the 2+ week trial. Police officers, school staff, bank employees, parents of the boys, neighbors at Mystery Morning Drive, friends of Gregg, friends of Pam, high school students, friends of the boys from Seabrook, Gregg Smart's killer, and his accessories to murder. Some of the most compelling testimony came from Billy Flynn himself. I've watched most of the testimony and read a lot of transcripts, and it's easy to feel for Billy Flynn. He was charmed. That old Eve tempted Adam with the apple trope. He was glamored. Did you ever watch True Blood? He tells the story of meeting and falling for Pam, getting close to her, learning how abusive Gregg was to Pam. He wasn't. Pam used that to manipulate Billy. How they started having sex, and how she quickly spoke of needing Gregg taken care of, and how if Gregg was around, they wouldn't be together. Billy spoke of 2 failed attempts to kill Gregg. One time, he'd gotten lost finding his way to Derry. Another time, Gregg had gotten home and foiled the plan. By April, Pam was saying it was him or me. Kill him or you don't have me. She pulled that bullshit. If you loved me, you would do this or you would do that. The kind of thing that makes me want to tell another woman to shut the fuck up, quite frankly. But I don't do that because I believe women should treat each other better and not act like total assholes and drop the whiny if you love me nonsense. Cecilia Pierce, who Pam had gone beyond mentoring straight to best friending. One would think Pam would know better than this, or it was part of her plan. It was Cecilia who sealed her fate, though. Over the month from mid-June to mid-July, Cecilia had been wired for sound, and her conversations with Pam were caught, 7 of them total. The recordings were damning. Pam would say that she was playing a game with Cecilia to trick her into telling her what she knew about the case. Because, of course, at that point, Pam was a suspect, so the police were no longer giving her information. Police had long shut her out. Cecilia Pierce told her story again. How she, Pam, and Billy would spend time together at school, at Pam's condo, how she walked in on Billy and Pam having sex, how she knew they were planning a murder, how there were conversations about planning the murder that increased over time. What Cecilia knew could have landed her in prison, or the slammer, as it's also known as, for many, many years. She had little choice but to cooperate. Her agreeing to wear a wire and implicate Pam Smart in the planning of Gregg's murder is ultimately what convicted Pam Smart. I believe without the tapes, there was a chance she could have been acquitted. The testimony of the boys was compelling, but the defense might have been more successful in painting them as criminals without the tapes. Pamela Smart took the stand in her own defense, and she was a formidable witness, a stoic one. She testified in hopes of swaying the jury in her favor. Some, I believe, it worked for, though the result wasn't an acquittal. The trial lasted for 2.5 weeks. After some 13 hours of deliberations, spread over 3 days, the jury announced its verdict. On the afternoon of Friday, March 22nd, the jury convicted her of witness tampering and conspiracy to commit murder, and of being an accomplice to first-degree murder. She stood without emotion, no reaction, as the guilty verdicts were read. Cheers were heard among those in the courtroom, most of which came from the Smart family, the loudest among them from Gregg's mom, Judy. Pam, meanwhile, remained composed. Here is a clip of the judge announcing her sentencing as the world watched it live from that Exeter courtroom.
Would the defendants please rise? Pamela Smart, on indictment number 90S1372, strike that, 1371, charging you with the offense of accomplice to first-degree murder on the jury's verdict of guilty and in accordance with the mandates of our state legislature, specifically RSA 626-8, Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 3A, and RSA 631A, Roman numeral 3, I am required and do hereby sentence you to the New Hampshire State Prison for Women for the remainder of your life without the possibility of parole. The remaining sentences will be imposed at a later date after the preparation of a formal pre-sentence investigation report.
There was an immediate response from Pamela Smart's defense team, which wasn't particularly audible for the purpose of this podcast. There would be an immediate appeal of her life sentence. When Judge Douglas Gray imposed life without the possibility of parole, there was no reaction by Pamela Smart. And I had wondered why Pamela Smart is serving a life without parole sentence. And I had blamed the media frenzy surrounding the case. And that still is a huge factor. Even Charles Manson got a chance at parole. He never got it. He's dead. But he did have the opportunity to seek it. Under New Hampshire law, an accomplice conviction meant she would spend the rest of her life in prison. Pamela Smart remains there, in prison, in Bedford Hills, New York. Her release date is 9/9/99/99. Without commutation of her sentence, that's a pardon from the governor of the state of New Hampshire, she will die in prison. She is 54 years old, and her supporters believe that hers is a grand miscarriage of justice, that she was the sacrificial lamb. The actual killers, teenagers who had criminal records and were well known to the police, admitted their guilt and received reduced sentences by blaming everything on Pamela Smart, who wasn't even there. And it was Pam herself who said no one would believe them over her, an educated professional media services coordinator. Well, she was wrong. And for their involvement, William Flynn and Patrick Pete Randall each received sentences of 28 years to life. J.R. Latimer received 18 years to life. Raymond Fowler, who told Danny Blake about the murder plot, who told Ralph Welch about the murder plot, who went to Vance Latimer Sr. about the murder and the use of his gun to kill Gregg Smart, Raymond Fowler was eventually implicated and pleaded guilty to conspiracy and was jailed for 15 to 30 years. So maybe you are wondering, where are they now? William Flynn was released from prison on June 4th, 2015, after serving 25 of a 28 years to life sentence after a sentence reduction. He made a promise to avoid the media at the request of the Smart family. So far, he has honored that. I've seen nothing from him. He lives in Maine with his wife, whom he married while in prison. Pete Randall was also paroled on June 4th, 2015, after serving 25 years of a 28 years to life sentence. Randall's prison sentence was reduced in a court order in 2009. J.R. Latimer, who supplied the getaway car, his grandmother's, and the gun from his father's own gun collection, was released on parole on August 8th, 2005, after serving 15 years. Raymond Fowler spent 12 years in prison for being part of the murder plot. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder and attempted burglary and was paroled on April 3rd, 2003. The Smart family did not object to his release, saying he deserved a second chance. Fowler was free for 1 year until he was arrested in 2004 on a parole violation. He was charged with disturbing the peace relating to a late-night visit to a former girlfriend's home in Salisbury, Massachusetts. He pleaded guilty to a witness tampering charge related to that visit and was sentenced to 1 to 3 years. The parole board ordered no additional time for his parole violation, and he was re-released on June 14, 2005, after serving 1 additional year in prison. And there's Cecilia Pierce, whose covert wiretapping sealed the deal for Pamela Smart. Cecilia received no charges and no jail time. And it's unclear as to whether she received any of those production deal payouts. She went on to become a registered nurse and married Danny Blake, a featured player in the story. You may recall Blake as the person who told Ralph Welch about the murder details and the motivation for Ralph to go question JR and Pete. Cecilia Pierce, now Cecilia Blake, a mother in her 40s, is living in northern New Hampshire. She has remained out of the spotlight by and large for many of the years after the trial concluded. In 2016, she was interviewed for New Hampshire Magazine, where she says, among many things, she wishes she had never met Pam Smart. In 2018, she appeared in the 3-part documentary, Pamela Smart, An American Murder Mystery for Investigation Discovery. Other players in the case appear, like Bill Spencer, the reporter, prosecutor Paul Maggiato, and now retired detective Daniel Pelletier. The Smart family never recovered from the loss of Gregg. His parents are both gone now, so the sons, Dean in particular, continue the fight. They do not wish for Pamela to ever be released from prison, barring only a full admission to her involvement with some consideration afterwards. Here's a clip from WMUR TV Channel 9, where the Smarts are talking about the 20th anniversary of Gregg's murder in 2010. Mr. Smart will pass away later that year.
Bill Smart has been wearing his son's wedding ring for 20 years.
This is his ring, yes. I've had it on since he died.
The pain is still fresh for Gregg Smart's family. Gregg's brother Dean and his father say the heartache returns quickly.
No, it doesn't seem like it's been 20 years. It still seems like it was a year or two ago.
Time has not changed how they feel about Pam Smart denying any role in her husband's murder.
This woman planned the whole thing, plotted it, and went through and did it. If it wasn't for her, Gregg would still be here.
I honestly don't think that Billy Flynn and Patrick Randall would have ever walked into that house and done what they did to Gregg if they weren't put up to it by her.
Billy Flynn and Patrick Randall will be eligible for release in 5 years. Despite Pam Smart saying her life sentence is not fair, Gregg's family says right now she should not be released.
No, unless she admitted her full involvement and served some extra time after she admitted it.
I'm just saying to her, if she ever admits that she did it, we may have other considerations to talk to her about at that time. At this time, we just want to go on with our lives and be happy.
Bill Smart says after 2 decades, his youngest son, Dean, will take over the legal battles. Bill Smart is fighting his own battle against pancreatic cancer.
And I've been fighting her for 20 years, and I'm sick of fighting her, so I'm not going to have Dean take the lead. Dean can take the lead. Because we don't know how much longer I have anyway.
And there's always a slight chance that some governor or somebody could pardon her. But I don't think that she will ever get out of prison.
Would you fight it?
Yes.
The Wojcicki family, meanwhile, remain committed to Pamela and her hope for freedom. In March of 1991, Pamela Smart was to serve out her life sentence at the Goffstown Prison for Women in Goffstown, New Hampshire, just outside of Manchester. 2 years into her incarceration, she was transferred to the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in Bedford, New York, for reasons that remain unknown to her family. When Mrs. Wojcicki learned of her daughter's transfer, she requested a meeting with the Department of Corrections Commissioner, Ronald Powell. Powell resigned 3 months later and left the state of New Hampshire. While the Wojcickis don't understand why Pam was transferred, the Attorney General's office says that she had a poor disciplinary record in New Hampshire. I also believe the Department of Corrections don't need to give a reason. Bedford Hills is more than 3 hours away from Windham, New Hampshire, where the family had been living at the time of Pam's arrest. Her family still makes trips to visit her. And if you are like me, you have this question. What about the dog? Halen the dog was raised by the Wojcicki family and passed away on August 2nd, 1998. That is 8 years after Pamela Smart's arrest. I have a great deal of compassion for all involved. For some, it's immaturity to the point of utter stupidity. Even for Pamela Smart, against my better judgment perhaps. I feel bad that she ruined her life. She was driven and could have done great things, like Gregg Smart would have had he been given the opportunity to do them. Pamela Smart has been in prison for 32 years. It has not been easy time served. She's been beaten, sexually assaulted, photos of her sold to National Enquirer. She will only see freedom if her sentence is commuted. She has never admitted to any involvement in the planning of Gregg's murder. And I don't see a way out for her, though her loyalist supporters work on her behalf. Dean Smart was there for Billy Flynn's parole hearing. While the family does not forgive him for murdering Gregg, they agreed that he had served his time. Billy Flynn, like the other boys, were not sentenced to life without parole. They had a chance at freedom. Pamela Smart and her most enthusiastic supporters believe that she should get a chance at freedom. The murder weapon in this case, I was surprised to learn, was returned to its owner 26 years after it was used to murder Gregg Smart. Rockingham Superior Court Judge Andrew Schulman ruled on March 8, 2016, that Vance Latimer Sr. is entitled to having his Charter Arms .38 caliber revolver returned, along with its holster and ammunition, back from the state. A year earlier, Mr. Latimer had filed a request for the return on the basis that police told him in 1990 his revolver would be returned after the investigation and trial were completed. The judge first denied the request in December of 2015. That's after Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeff Strelzin argued that the gun could be needed in the case if Pam Smart sought a pardon from the governor, which she has and has been denied. In a 13-page ruling, the judge said he would rather see the gun destroyed. He noted that the case gained nationwide notoriety, turning those convicted into B-list celebrities. He said that the gun could also attain B-list status and potentially be sold online or at auction for a large amount of money. Schulman cited that a pistol was sold at an auction in Nashua, New Hampshire for more than $250,000 because it was strapped to Bonnie Parker of Bonnie and Clyde fame at the time of her death. Pam's mother, Linda Wojcik, filed a complaint at the time, wanting to know if it was necessary to retry the case in the media, and felt that the judge had injected his personal views and tainting any future legal relief for her daughter. And Pamela Smart continues to seek her freedom. In March of 2022, 31 years after her conviction, her latest attempt to be released was rejected in a 5-0 vote by a New Hampshire State Council. It's the third time Smart has asked the council for a hearing. She has exhausted all of her judicial appeal options. This time, though, she finally offered an apology to the Smart family for the first time since she was arrested in August of 1990 for the murder of Gregg Smart. Her most recent petition was submitted in 2021. She can retry every 2 years, so she will be back at it in 2023. Thank you for listening. That concludes part 3 of 3, The Murder of Gregg Smart, Derry, New Hampshire. Please go and listen to the first 2 parts, episode 32 and 33. And while you're there, listen to all the past episodes. And while you're there, rate and review the show. Written reviews, 5 stars, are my absolute favorite. Use the code ANNIVERSARY to save 30% off on the Crime of the Truest Kind merch store, linked at crimeofthetruestkind.com. Follow the show, crimeofthetruestkind.com, on Instagram, Crime of the Truest Kind, on Facebook, Crime of the Truest Kind, on TikTok, Crime of the Truest Kind, on Twitter, @TruestKinds. Rate and review the show. Tell somebody about this show. Share it. Go on one of your message boards or one of your Facebook groups and tell people about the show. It would be wonderful if you did that. Become a patron. You can join one of the 4 tiers starting at $1 a month. Thank you for everything. I'm feeling much better. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Brand new New England crime story. Bye, everybody. Bye. Lock your goddamn doors.